Hello and welcome along to this week's Factory Talk. Now, this week we have one of the great brand names from British manufacturing on the programme. Originally founded back in 1898 as a manufacturer of fittings and parts for the two-wheeled trade, Norton has gone on to become synonymous with British motorbikes. And I'm delighted that the company's CEO, John Russell, is our guest this week. John, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Just begin. I gave a brief history then of Norton. Tell us a bit more about the company and about how you got to be the CEO.
Well, first of all, I think the key point you said is the extraordinary history of this company. A company with, I grew up in the 1950s and 60s in probably one of the heydays of the brand. Extraordinary company, extraordinary road bikes, extraordinary racing pedigree. My involvement, I retired out of full-time roles about 7 or 8 years ago. I've been doing a mixture of things, including doing consultancy for TVS, the Indian motorcycle manufacturer. And we talked for some time about a business expansion strategy built around buying a famous brand and rebuilding it. And Norton was top of that list. Roll it forward a few years and Norton became available. TVS bought the company and they asked me to act as interim CEO as we got the company started.
So do you ride a motorbike yourself, or have you ridden a motorbike?
I have a motorcycle license. When my neck began to freeze a few years ago, I decided I was quite a dangerous liability on a motorcycle. So I don't ride very often these days, but hoping to get back onto a bike when we build a bike that's safe enough for me to ride.
So are you an enthusiastic biker turned businessman, or an enthusiastic businessman who's also a biker?
I was always fascinated by everything to do with engineering. Always loved cars and bikes in my youth, and wanted to work in the industry. Began, thinking I might be an engineer. Turned out that wasn't the path for me, and chose a path in sales and marketing. But always fascinated by anything mechanical, anything that goes fast and exhilarates and inspires the soul. So I've been fortunate to be able to work in an industry that I absolutely love.
There is something about motorcycles, isn't there? The appeal of them is enduring. I mean, they've been around for over a century. Norton's been around for over a century, but there is just
Yeah.
something about a motorbike when you hear one coming up the road towards you.
Yeah, I think it operates at two levels. I think the sheer exhilaration, the sense of being in control. It's almost like the modern incarnation of a horse, really. You have a different perspective on the world. You can smell the grass cuttings as you drive past somebody's house where they've been out with a lawnmower. You get a sense of the environment you're in, and it's absolutely exhilarating. But another level, it feels really good to just be on a bike. We talk about the sort of the mental attitude behind bikers. There's a sense of camaraderie, being out on the road, band of brothers, all of these things. And there's this fantastic array of the emotional and practical aspects that make motorcycling such an exciting sport.
Let's talk a little bit more about the company then. You explained what's been happening over the last few years at the start of the program. I think you're moving to a new location, or you will be moving shortly. What does this say about the continued growth of Norton?
I think the first thing it says is that TVS are very, very serious about building Norton back to its former glory. And we started on a path back in April when we bought the company. Clearly, the business was not in good shape, needed a lot of investment, a lot of building up. And we made an early decision that we needed new premises, at least for the interim period, to get the brand up and running. So we settled on a building in Solihull, very nice location, good access to key resources that we need. And we set about refurbishing it to be the factory that we need for the foreseeable future. That refurb program is coming to an end. We've got the manufacturing facility sort of 99% complete. We've built our first few motorcycles there. And once we're through the COVID restrictions, we'll be able to move all of our people into that site.
So, John, talk to me more then about TVS, about what it's bringing. It's been about a year now since you took control of Norton. What does it mean about the future of the brand? Does it strengthen Norton moving forward?
it very definitely strengthens Norton. I think in many respects, it's the perfect owner for the brand. TVS, a long established, very ethical Indian company. They've built a variety of businesses, but at the core of their business is a very large two-wheeler and three-wheeler business. They build at nearly 4 million units a year now. They have a quality reputation in all the markets they sell. They sell in about 80 different markets in the world. And importantly, they take a very long-term view of things. And I think they bring to us, lots of resources. They bring financial strength. They have engineering capabilities that we can leverage. But most importantly, they have a tremendous sense of building a business. And Norton needs that more than anything, I think, at this time. It's a brand with absolutely massive potential. TVS see it as a key strategic activity for them. And I think this puts Norton in a very, very good place.
Let's talk about the bikes themselves a little bit then. The manufacturing process, has that changed greatly over recent years? And do you envisage it changing moving forward? I mean, I'm thinking cars have been pretty traditional for a long time, but obviously with the demise, if you like, of the internal combustion engine, the technology is changing. What about motorcycles?
Yeah, I think motorcycles have got to follow a similar path. The driver for electric powertrain is all about global carbon emissions. We're not immune to that, and we've got to wrestle that problem. I think the motorcycle industry, and Norton in particular, has some very unique challenges in terms of the way you actually deploy an EV in a motorcycle versus the way it's deployed in a car. The IC engine in a motorcycle is integral to the experience of the motorcycle. Some level of vibration, some level of sort of visceral behavior that fuels some of the characteristic and some of the enjoyment of riding a motorcycle. And I think our challenge is, how do we create that same level of excitement with an EV powertrain that we currently deliver with an internal combustion engine? And that's what we'll be working on over the coming years.
I was going to mention that. That is a key thing. You sit on a motorbike and the noise and the vibration is part of the experience, isn't it? Are you going to be able to keep that then with a switch over to electric powered bikes?
Well, I think firstly, the two characteristics that you really want in terms of performance around torque and power, they are eminently achievable. In fact, in many respects, it's you have more options and more opportunities. But you're right; it's the look, sound, feel aspect of the current bike that we've somehow either got to replicate, or we've got to find some attributes that make those redundant. And that's the piece that we've got to work on in the coming years.
Is there a timeline when you see bikes becoming all electric?
Well, at the moment, it varies by market around the world, but typically people are heading towards the end of this decade, maybe into 2020, 2035. Motorcycles have not been specifically mandated yet, but we expect a timeline not dissimilar to what's happening on cars. Now, given the time cycle for developing new powertrains, that means we've got to get on with this pretty quickly, because before we know it, these deadlines will be upon us. Regulators will mandate it. Customers will be expecting it. So there's a huge amount of work to be done, and a significant task for the business to face.
I mentioned at the start of the program that Norton is one of the great names of British manufacturing, over 100 years of history. Over that time, you've built up a very loyal customer base. How are you going to make sure that you hang on to that customer base? Because they will like the bikes of the past if they're going to change.
Well, I think that there's several aspects to that. I think the first thing is, I was amazed by the sheer warmth towards the Norton brand when I took over this role. I was a great Norton fan, so I didn't expect, not to be able to find that. But what I was surprised by was just how overwhelmingly positive it all was. Norton has had a tricky last 10 years. Quite a few people have been hurt by what happened in the company. And I did expect a fair degree of negative response to what we were doing. But the response has been almost entirely positive. So I think we begin with a fantastic start point. I think the second thing about it is this whole concept of TVS being long term. They almost consider themselves to be custodians of this brand. So they're going to nurture it, they're going to develop it. The final point is, your point about, people liking Norton in the past. The thing you have to remember about Norton's history was that it was always contemporary. The Commando motorcycle, probably our best known product today, is a very retrospective product. But in its day, it was the world's fastest road bike. So we have to think about how do we balance between, if you like, the retrospective aspects of the brand that might appeal to some of the more longer term loyalists versus us being an edgy, contemporary, technology driven brand in the future. And getting that balance right is going to be a key part of our strategy.
Yeah, that's you preempted my next question. That is a key point, isn't it? When you've got something as beloved as a Norton bike, that balance between the tradition, the what's gone previously, and the innovation and the change that you're probably going to have to introduce. It's quite a tightrope you've got to walk.
Absolutely, and it's interesting what's going on in Jaguar Land Rover at the moment, where they're struggling to define, a new contemporary sort of version of a great brand Jaguar that really has got lost in its history to some extent, and we've got to make sure we avoid that pitfall. There is a lot of interest in retro motorcycles. You look across the sales of motorcycles across the world, and the various retro versions of various brands do play out very strongly. But at the same time, we've got to apply new technologies. We've got to come up with new concepts for bikes. We've got to make sure that we're appealing to new riders, not just the loyalists that we've sold to in the past. But I think your point about the tightrope is absolutely right. And we've got to make sure that what we do fits with the brand. What we do is taking our customers far enough forward to keep them with us, but not so far away from their understanding of the brand that the product fails as a consequence.
Where around the world do you particularly sell? Where's Norton popular these days?
Well, historically, it's been popular everywhere. In the more recent times, the sales volumes have been quite small, but the interest is almost global. We've begun opening up access to the company through social media channels and what have you, and we're beginning to pick up high levels of inquiry, and they are global. We're getting all across Europe. North America has been historically a very big market for Norton. A lot of our inquiries coming from there, a lot coming from the Far East, from Japan, South Africa, just about Australia, just about everywhere in the world. And our challenge against that is, how do we build bikes quickly enough? How do we homologate for all of those territories? And how do we navigate a pathway that gets us established properly in those markets, present the brand properly in each market in the world, and make sure we've got happy customers riding great motorcycles?
Yeah. Finally, John, we're nearly out of time. One of the themes of this interview has been the story of the brand, how it's endured. What advice would you give to businesses to ensure that they can survive, as Norton has done for over 120 years? Because it's probably a small number of companies that can boast a history like that.
Yeah, I think it's firstly, it's very difficult to create a brand with the presence, with the appeal, with the durability of something like Norton, but it can be done. And I suppose it all begins with, basic fundamentals. You've got to build a product, supply a service, or whatever business you're in, that meets a customer requirement. It's got to have, the fundamentals of its rational delivery, whatever that product is. And then you've got to start layering on top of that fundamental sort of product acceptance some emotional benefits. Build a brand around trust or excitement or fashionability of whatever it might be. But you have to navigate your way beyond just making a great product. The world is full of great products. You have to create products with a stronger bond with the customer. And I think the key step of that is staying as close to your customer as possible. It's very easy in all businesses to get very engaged with the knitting of the business, become very internally focused. But you've really got to get out there and understand what it is your customers think about you, what it is they think about the alternatives they have, and how do you design your brand in the same way as you design your product so that it's appealing to customers, it gives you competitive advantage, and you keep managing that over the long term. Now, a lot of the great brands have come about almost by accident, but generally there's somebody behind that brand who's really understood that process and stayed engaged with the customer. And I think that is, for me, the one lesson I've learned in my life of dealing with lots of great brands. Just stay close to the customer and have a proactive approach to how you build the brand and build the appeal of what you're doing.
Finally, John, in 5 years' time, then, what would be success for you as far as Norton? Where would you like to see the company in 5 years?
I think in 5 years' time, what I think the waypoint, because we're on a long journey, we want to become the world's best motorcycle, the best premium motorcycle brand. So for people to be saying, Norton is on its way, it's delivering. What we're seeing at that point in time is the best we've seen from Norton so far. And people can then begin to imagine what Norton can do beyond that.
John, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much indeed. And we really look forward to seeing those Nortons coming up of the factory production line in the coming months and years. Thank you very much indeed, John Russell, CEO of
Thank
Norton
you.
Motorcycles. We'll be back with another Factory Talk again shortly. But thanks for joining us this week. Bye-bye now.